Hey class, first of all, thanks for your patience in all of this. I know there's been some issues um, for all of you around assignments and such that have probably caused a little consternation, and for that I'm sorry. Uh, I don't want to cop out on it. It always it always rolls downhill, and I'm kind of downhill from the apex of this thing. So all I can say is I haven't had any control over most of this, so I'm sorry. Um, and I hope that the class ends up being good, something that you can relate to and you can get some knowledge out of that'll affect you and benefit you in your endeavors. This last class, we're talking about final P of the four P's: product, price, place, promotion, and this being price. And price is a little more complicated than we typically give it credit for. Um, It's not just the list price or MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price that you see on the slip. Rather, it also includes things like discounts, whether they be volume discounts or whatever, allowances, um, payment periods, payment cycles, and actual credit terms. An example of that is you often get a discount if you pay for in the first 10 days you get a receipt rather than taking the 30 to 60 days that you otherwise might be offered. So price is important to the seller because it affects our revenue, but to the consumer as well because price is what you're going to spend, and also consumers make a lot of associations between price and quality. So there are many different facets or dimensions to the whole issue or significance of price is one of the P's that you can manipulate. So we might have three overall general objectives when we modify or manipulate our price. One might be a profit oriented, like I said. It's the easiest thing to do to increase revenue or profits in some cases. That is to increase the price, aside from the impacts of doing that might be negative. Uh, we might take a sales oriented perspective or strategy view, which would be, say, if you're a car company, you lower prices on remaining inventory so that you can literally turn that standing inventory into cash and purchase more immediate models that the customers want. It may be related to annual new models coming on. The same thing exists around fashions when there's seasonal turnover. And then if you're certain kind of business like the neighborhood bar, it might be just around maintaining the status quo. So as far as sales-oriented pricing objectives, like I said, you may do it for reasons other than simply making money. It may be to move inventory so you can turn that inventory into uh, cash and purchase more relevant current inventory depending on your product and your industry. So that's a sales maximization. Uh, or you may be trying to, if it's new product introduction, to carve out market share. And market share is just your share of the overall industry within a particular sector. Sales maximization, on the other hand, uh, shouldn't ever be a long-term objective because cash maximization may mean little or no profitability. So without profits, a company simply can't survive. As you would probably infer, status quo pricing objective is really just to maintain your existing place uh, within your marketplace, simply in most cases just to meet the competition's pricing. And in that regard, it doesn't really require much planning, and it is really just a passive policy. Now you all remember from economics that price has a direct relationship to demand and supply. The greater the demand, the greater the pressure on the price, and the smaller the supply, same thing. The price will, if there's a demand for the supply, that as supply decreases, price will go up. One of the things that defines the relationship therein between pricing or price and demand is the price elasticity of the demand. What's that mean? Well, if there is an inelastic demand, demand hardly changes with a small change in price. What would that be? That'd be things like your water and your electricity. If there is an elastic demand, demand changes greatly with a small change in price. That's true for Starbucks coffee. It's probably true to some. It's true. It's inelastic on gasoline up to a point, and then it becomes extremely elastic. And other kinds of food items would probably fall into elastic. As with housing, there's a big difference in, let's say, price. So things that can affect the elasticity of demand include the availability of different substitutes. There isn't much of a substitute for water and electricity uh, if you count beer and soda as substitutes for water. Yeah, there's substitutes. But most of us won't give beer to our kids, at least not after they've gone to sleep. Price relative to purchasing power means that if the price is so low that it's sort of an inconsequential part of an individual's overall budget, then demand is going to be inelastic. As far as product durability, uh, repairing durable products rather than replacing them prolongs their useful life. So thus people are sensitive to the price increase and the demand is elastic. As far as a product's other uses, well, the greater the number of uses for a product, the more elastic demand tends to be. If a product has only one use, then the quantity purchased probably will not vary as price varies. Dynamic pricing is an interesting phenom because more and more companies are turning to dynamic pricing. And it's most useful when two product or service characteristics coexist. So it might be, a good example might be when you get differences in demand as a consequence of seasonality. So you have a higher demand over certain holidays and you can raise the prices, and then you lower the prices at other times to create demand. And that might be true in movie theaters, actually, um, where you have differences in demand at different times of the day, so you manipulate the price in order to regulate the demand. And of course, that's true for motels and hotels. As well as airlines. So, the other thing that can affect our pricing is a product's place in the overall product life cycle. In the introductory stage, we generally have two kinds of uh, pricing possibilities. We have penetration pricing, or we have skimming. And skimming is maintaining sort of a higher price because it's in great demand and there's not a lot of competition. And so you can keep prices higher. The growth stage, prices start to come down a little bit as competition increases and you're trying to build market share. And then in the maturity stage, prices come down even more as you have fewer and fewer competitors and you begin to compete on price. And in the decline stage, prices decrease even further as your product becomes, in the Boston matrix, a cash cow, and you just really are trying to maintain a demand so you can maintain the cash flow of the item. So all these things indicate that there's a strategy to setting the right price. And it all starts with defining, when you begin to manipulate the price, what it is you're trying to accomplish. Am I trying to increase revenues? Am I trying to get rid of inventory? Am I trying to increase market share? What is it that I'm trying to do? One of the things you want to be concerned about is price discrimination. It's illegal, and it generally occurs when and it can occur for a lot of different reasons, but it generally occurs because you're trying to manipulate the price to the discredit of a particular group. Could be racial, could be age, could be gender, could be for a lot of different reasons. Uh, Predatory pricing is another pricing strategy that's illegal. That an example of that would be you sell a shovel after a hurricane for $50 because somebody needs to dig their car out of the driveway because of the mud that was dumped on it from a landslide caused by the hurricane, something like that, or even more likely. I think after Hurricane Katrina, that gasoline within certain areas was selling for multiple dollars per gallon because it was in short supply. So that's called predatory pricing, and that's illegal. As we define what it is our overall objective is, we can come up with different tactics to kind of fine tune our pricing strategy. We can use discounts, geographic pricing, and related other pricing tactics. And a geographic pricing, for example, would be uh, in the wintertime, where do you expect a snowplow to be more expensive, Texas or New England? And the answer is obviously, if you think about it hard enough, in Texas, because it doesn't snow in Texas, and we would expect to have a smaller supply. And so when there is a great need, then the price would be higher. It goes back to the supply and demand curve. Now, let me run through these different types of price setting strategies. First is cost plus. Second is markup, competitors, value based, new products, product mix, psychological. So what are some examples? Well, cost plus is typically used by something like a contractor who figures out all of his costs to produce a given product like a house. So he would add up all the materials, all the different kinds of materials, his estimated labor, and then he would add normally a 5 to 10% um, contingency estimate. So, in case prices go up during construction or he ends up being a little bit wrong, it's like a fudge factor. And then he adds his desired profit on top of that. For a small contractor on a house, I can tell you that's normally 15 to 20%. If you're a contractor on a high-end construction home, it's higher than that. This is a similar pricing strategy that's used by engineers, by architects, and so forth, or different kinds of consultants. The markup is a very similar strategy where you add up all your costs, all your overhead, etc., and let's say you're a boutique fashion operation, and so you add up all those expenses, and then you decide how much you have to mark up your product in order to cover those expenses and make your desired profit. It's not the only difference between it and a cost plus is in a markup, you are buying something from somebody and selling something to somebody else. So you're sort of a middleman, or you're the end product in the supply chain or value chain. Whereas in cost plus, you're making something. That's the only difference. Competitors is the most commonly used pricing strategy for small businesses. They price out their competition. Value-based is not so much about bundling like is used in a fast food restaurant and given what's called a value meal. Value-based is really what people are willing to pay for your product. And so if it's a home, prices vary differently from area to area based on location. I mean, if you took the exact same home in Portland, Oregon with a view of the river and put it down in Honolulu with a view of the ocean, and it's the exact same home more or less, it'd be worth a lot more in Honolulu because people are willing to pay more for it there because of the location, because of the related peripheral experiential sort of attributes, Maslow related needs around recognition and on and on. All those things that again go back to affecting supply and demand. So value based is what people are willing to pay for it for whatever reason. New products, again, we have two different strategies when we introduce them. It can be skimming, which is maintaining a high level for as long as you can because you sort of own the market, or it can be penetration pricing because it's a simple product and you want to gain market share. We have product mix pricing and then psychological pricing. I'll give you some examples of those here in a second. So product mix pricing or product line pricing is when you have a lot of different choices and they're all priced differently based on sort of user fundamentals. A good example would be lawnmowers, the most simple and cheapest of which are hand-pushed ones that are fairly cheap. And then as you go up to electric and various size gas-operated lawnmowers up to the ones that you can actually ride, they're all priced very differently. product mix, pricing strategies. Good. They use two pricing options: optional product, and captive product. And so, if you think cell phones, an optional product would be all that crap you can buy in an Apple store and pay a ridiculous amount of money to complement your Apple phone. So you buy your cover for $35, $45 in the Apple store, but that you can buy on Amazon for a lot cheaper. Both examples of which are made probably for less than $1 in China or somewhere else. So if it's a camera, this is real old school. It could be a lens cover or something like that, or it could be a tripod or whatever that goes with your camera. And then the captive product is in the old days again for a camera would be film and development of the film. So that's how they made their money then. They sold the camera probably as a loss leader almost at or near above break even. And then they sold these peripheral things where they made their money. That's found its way into the shaving industry now, which made the opportunity for Dollar Shave Club. And so you find it in razors, you find it in uh, toothbrushes, you find it in copy machines. Where they used to make their money, big money on machines, they now make it on the peripherals. Psychological pricing, odd-in pricing, is commonly used. I mean, you don't hear somebody saying $5. That's rare. You hear them say $4.95 or $4.99. It has a real psychological advantage. Another psychological pricing scheme. These next couple are out of Costco, and when I was living in Virginia in Norfolk, when you went to the Costco there, I don't think they had a bottle of wine over $50. And that's all because of the people, the demographic of the Costco buyer in Norfolk. And this picture was taken in Beaverton, Oregon, where there's a lot of, right close to, it's not far from the Nike factory, or headquarters rather. And, so lots of people making money. There's a lot of Intel and HP software firms in that immediate area as well. And they're not really trying to sell $1,500 bottled wine, although I'm sure they've got people in that in their membership that can afford it. What they're trying to do is to get people to key off of that price and say, "Oh my, I came in here to buy a $2 chuck." That's Trader Joe's, but same concept. Uh, and 1,500 is a little expensive. I wish I could afford it, but $29.99 sounded pretty cheap. You got the same thing working here. This was sitting next door to the one you just saw, and so you get this $1,500 bottle, and you get, wow, that's really expensive. So it's $99.99. Here we're looking at the psychological pricing, odd ending. But 43 sounds pretty good. I really came in here looking for a $30 bottle of wine, but gosh, I think I'll splurge and buy this $43 bottle. And it works. It's psychological pricing, but it works to the extent that you have people within your overall regional market that don't think twice about buying. Well, they think twice about buying a bottle of wine for $43.99, but in getting them to just think twice about it rather than to not think about it at all, you've caught them. Kind of same concept here. You got Dom Perignon next to a quote cheap unquote alternative, only 40 some odd dollars per bottle. The ultimate psychological pricing gimmick, Candy Crush. The apps have brought in this whole different kind of pricing structure that really they found appeals to people with compulsive disorder uh, and addictive personalities where they uh, get you kind of involved in the game, and then as soon as you fail a particular layer, they cut you off, and if you want to get back in the moment, you have to pay. And most people want to get back in, so they pay. I talked about these earlier of new product pricing strategies in the product life cycle, introduction stage, two strategies, skimming and market penetration. Most again companies use competition based pricing. Geographic pricing we talked about earlier. And there's a myriad of other uh, pricing tactics, price lining. I'll let you read through these. Um, but this is it. This is a pretty good, fast, thorough 25-minute overview of different pricing strategies. The bottom line is that pricing is really one of the underrated strategies of the four P's. Again, I think it's underrated because people, when you think about pricing, is, well, what am I going to put up there as a price without any thought to what the consumer actually thinks about it. I mean, businesses think about it from that perspective, but as customers, we don't often. But point is, it's a lot more complicated than it is as we view it as retailers.